Everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We've got a lot to get to today. We got an early start for Arkansas's basketball game at South Carolina as we're getting into basically the final week of the regular season and Arkansas being a bubble team. I've got a bubble update today is Joe Lenardi with ESPN Bracketology. That's the one I refer to when I talk bracketology and where Arkansas is. Had his Friday morning update. It's good news for Arkansas relative to being on the bubble. Arkansas probably had the biggest growth in the last few days in terms of improvement on the bubble, in terms of, again, bracketology from Joe Lenardi at ESPN. We're also going to have a brief preview of Arkansas at South Carolina. I'm going to end with that. We're going to start with recruiting, though. I've got some small nuggets of new intel. I consider it, some of it's I would consider good source information, some of it kind of cobbling together things behind the scenes. And the talking points aren't vastly different on 2025 five-star Nate Ament. He's got so many eyes on him nationally because of the fact that there are no players in the top five that hadn't already named their destination. So he's the last one of those. And really, when you look at it, he's probably the one player who's out there who's the most intriguing in terms of his positional value, because he's kind of one of those positionless guys. With his ability to bring you guard and wing productivity and some of the things he does on the floor, facing the basket and stretching a defense and his defensive gravity. But he's also got enough height and length. I mean, I've considered him a 6'9". Some people list him at 6'10". Good morning, G-Man. But, he's a guy that I think at the college level can still be a small ball four. So he just brings so much versatility. And he looks like a surefire lottery pick, arguably a top 5 NBA draft pick, and what is expected to be a loaded 2026 NBA draft. That's for certain. And so Nate Ament just brings a lot of qualities that makes him so coveted, which makes this whole notion that his NIL, it is a highest bidder kind of thing at this point. I mean, he's put off his announcement date to April 1st. We've still got more than a month to go, counting about a month to go because tomorrow's March 1st. So you're getting there. But he just cut his list to 5. Arkansas made the cut. The only team on the list, it's Arkansas, Duke, Louisville, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Arkansas is the only destination or the only team on his list that he hasn't taken a visit to. And we've been talking about Nate Ament for a long time because Calipari's made a priority of him by continually going out to see him starting back in early September all the way through where we are now. So you're talking about, basically 6 months worth of pursuit and a lot of time invested, including the last time that I'm aware of, just over a week ago, going out to see him, put up a 32.11 rebound, 4-block game and to win a private school title is back-to-back. But he didn't go alone. Calipari took Chen Coleman and Kenny Payne, his 2 associate head coaches. And here you are at the end of a bubble season where every game matters, and you took the time to make sure you were away to see him. And I think that was smart. So I've said this all along, and this is just kind of recapping at this point. Calipari's not making these moves just to be appear on someone's finals list. He's doing it because he believes, based on his conversations with the player, his camp, his agent, that he's going to get a visit with a chance to close it. So all the national, gurus that cover recruiting on a national level, and even some of the ones that cover it locally for the programs I mentioned, haven't really talked as much about Arkansas because there has been no publicly known visit date, no publicly known planned visit, and no traction there, whereas he's visited all the other schools on that list and even cut some teams that didn't make the list from consideration that he visited, Texas being an example. So if you're an Arkansas fan, you got to think, well, why are you on the finals list? You're probably going to get a visit. So the intel is multi-parts here. It's nothing major, but it is intel. So having talked to several people that are covering this pretty closely, some that have some really good connections here, they feel like that this valuation for this player, this drive up on NIL, this highest bidder thing, they think the ultimate goal is to get him in the neighborhood of $3 million. Well, whether that's north of $3 million or just south of it, that's probably where they think they can get this from where it is now and how it's escalated. With this being the last really big prize on the table, where you're not really sure. I mean, Duke and Louisville have been kind of the front runners, and they may very well truthfully be, but I don't think it's, why wait a month if you're that close to making a decision unless you're going to use other schools to drive up one or both of those schools in NIL. But if you're doing that, you're not 100% sold that you want to go there based on what they're offering you now. So that's something to think about. So if this is a highest bidder thing, Arkansas can bid with anybody. It's just, where does Calipari put his valuation on players? I talk about it all the time. But if this is heading to $3 million, the numbers I've heard behind the scenes, which I haven't talked about here, I haven't brought it up, that Arkansas might be willing to do, don't approach that. I don't know what other schools are willing to do. I think maybe a Louisville, they've got a 5-star top 10 rated guy. Some people project him as the highest rated point guard in that class, Mikael Brown Jr. Louisville has him already on board. Nate Ament would be another top 10 rated 5-star prize. Arkansas's got 2 top 5 rated 5-star guards, including a point guard who I think is the best point guard in the country, and Darius Haycuff Jr. Not just because he's at Arkansas, he's a finalist for National Player of the Year. We've been tracking this all year long and talking about how he's not only putting the production up, but his team is winning games because of him late in close games, the decisions he makes. And I go back to what he did for Team USA. Anyway, don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but Arkansas's got 2 really quality. Malik Thomas just put up a huge game with a Calipari in attendance a few days ago. So Arkansas's in a place to show Nate Ament, just like some of these other schools are saying, look what we already have. You complete the puzzle. Duke's got a loaded class. We know that. The other players, and I mentioned Louisville's got a 5-star player on board. Kentucky has a really highly rated recruiting class as well. Arkansas's got a top 5 rated class when you look at Acuff and Malik Thomas and Isaiah Sealy out of Northwest Arkansas. So, but Arkansas's got the NIL purse. It's just, how do they want to disperse that? Where are they going to go in terms of retention and figure out how much money they want to spend to keep players competing with maybe going pro, or even looking in the portal to get more money somewhere else. No, Malik Thomas is not shy to shoot the ball. Thanks for the comment. All right, so Nate Ament, that's one nugget of intel, is just kind of cobbling together the last few days. Some of the people really close to this, the consensus is this is trying to get to a $3 million valuation. AJ DeBonsa, the number 1 rated, or maybe number 2 rated now, Jonathan Givony for ESPN and NBA Draft Express, they're sort of their draft guru, actually has Darren Peterson, the shooting guard, is now the number 1 NBA draft prospect in that 2026 class. DeBonsa has slid down to the 2nd spot. Regardless, there's a little bit of a difference between projecting where guys will be drafted and where they rank right now as prospects in terms of what qualities they might bring to this first, at least 1 year that they're going to have to play at college. But Nate Ament's in both of those conversations. He's arguably, he's the 3rd ranked player in the high school ranks. He's looked at as going to be maybe as good as anybody at the college level. And he's got the potential not only to be a top 5 pick in 2026, but the potential maybe to be the number 1 overall pick. So he slots both. So you understand why everybody's after this guy. But DeBonsa has a $5 or $6 million, I don't know what his setup is with BYU, but it's up there. And those are the numbers being thrown around. I don't know if there's been an exact figure that's been confirmed by anybody, but if that's true, that sort of sets a bar on the market. And Nate Ament's not too far away. We're $3 million. $7 million, is that $7 million? Is that what they're, no, is someone saying $7 million for DeBonsa? You didn't put a name with that. I don't think Nate Ament, I don't know if he's in that range or ballpark. But $3 million seems reasonable relative to some of these other things we're hearing. It may not be reasonable for some schools that are in this Final 5 to go that far. Is Arkansas. Again, the numbers I've heard on the back end are anywhere from half to 2/3 of that. Maybe John Tyson is committed to helping John Calipari win a title. I think Arkansas showing success since the 0-5 start in league play certainly gives you the idea that Calipari's not a wash. That he's going to still recruit at a high level, but in the world of NIL, just like everybody else, that's going to be probably the main factor for most of these high level guys. They're going to maximize their value. A basketball career, put LeBron James aside, playing into his 40s at that level. There aren't a lot of players that are going to, and even then, if LeBron James retires and the next 2 or 3 years or 5 years for that matter, he's still 45 with a lot of life to live. he's made so much money, he's not going to have to do anything. He'll probably want to do something to stay busy. But the point is, most players can't bet that they're going to be that guy. So they're going to maximize their money when they can, as soon as they can, and how they can. And so, yeah, relationships still matter to some degree. Calipari's not going to, go after a player that's not willing to visit. So I think, again, that it's just a matter of time. So the first part of the intel is kind of where folks think this valuation's headed. If you've heard that already, I haven't specifically seen that anywhere, so maybe it's not intel to you, but that's kind of what the thought process is. 30 days is a long time, especially if you get into a bidding war, like you saw in Willy Wonka with the golden ticket. It may get insane with with the bidding where the queen comes in and puts in the highest bid. So who knows how desperate teams get or where it could go. But right now the thinking is maybe it's a $3 million landing place. The other nugget of intel I'm going to throw in here is that Arkansas, I've got it from a good source, that Arkansas is efforting to wrap up to get a visit scheduled and wrapped up. Efforting. Okay, so one of two things come to mind immediately. They've already got it wrapped up. They've got it figured out or close to it. It's going to happen, and it's just about a timing thing for when this gets announced. And so they're not, because I get that all the time. A lot of coaches it's already kind of set, but they don't want to get it out there before they think it's time, or the player and their family and their representation want it out there. So they don't want to spoil that. It's either that, or they're still efforting to get him out there, to get him to Fayetteville. And again, the Arkansas is not in the Final Five without him. That's not a, here's a little carrot for you, John Calipari. I'll put you on. Again, that's just not how he operates. And Nate Ament, the way he's handling things, I don't see him doing that just to have that cachet of saying, look, Calipari really wanted me, and I even didn't. I mean, who knows what'll happen? Caleb Wilson had planned to visit Arkansas, and I knew a date on that for a while. And then he moved that to another date, and it didn't play out. Arkansas peeled back instead of staying in hanging in there. And what it felt like was, probably not the best communication, especially given the clutch agency representation in there may have played a factor in that. But Arkansas didn't want to be used to help grow NIL for someone that really wasn't interested. This looks different to me. It seems obvious that it is. And now it's a matter of, will Arkansas can be the highest bidder. That's the point. They can be. Then you have to understand, well, then are you going to raise more money because you're going to have to go portal? You've got retention, and you've got these other high school guys, whatever agreement you have with them. Or are you going to disperse it differently? I mean, there's an idea that Calipari needs to grow his roster based on attrition, based on the issues. We're seeing it right now. We saw it early in the year, middle of the year. We're seeing it again with a Duthero out. So you grow it to 10 or 11, which means you might have to spread it a little thinner at the back end of that. So you got a lot of different things to consider while you're doing this. Calipari's got the chips in the middle of the table to this point. There's no doubt about that. So he ain't scared. It's just a matter of, again, the numbers I've heard in the background for Arkansas are about half to maybe 2/3, maybe a little more than that. The last figure I heard, maybe gets it closer to 70% of if $3 million is the target. And if it's more than that, I mean, how far does Calipari go? How far does Arkansas go? So there's a couple of pieces of nuggets of information, just some talk behind the scenes about where maybe Nate Ament and his camp are trying to get with total NIL package. And then Arkansas hearing that they're still efforting a visit. So again, I think that means one of two things. Either they've got one out there and they just aren't ready to. So they're not telling anybody anything enough to suggest that it's going to happen. And then on the other part of that is maybe that's true. They haven't gotten it worked out yet, and they're talking that he wants to visit, because that's what I was told by an NBA scout back in December. Remember that he was planning to come to a game, but I never got a game date. He was asking me what the game date was, which opponent, and I never got that information. So that makes me think that potentially there wasn't one planned. I circled back to the same source, and because he had told me before when I circled back to him, where he got the information, he didn't know if it was the kid wants to do it or it's actually already planned. He didn't drill down much. He just heard he's going to, he'll come for a visit for a game when Arkansas is hosting a game to visit, and didn't drill down on is that already actually set up, or that's what he wants to do, because he just assumed it was set up, and then it was asking me, well, which game day is it, thinking maybe I knew. So I asked him to circle back on that, and his impression is that it's just that he wanted to. That was probably what he would do, not that there was something set in stone. All right, that kind of makes sense. So that's a little bit more intel. It's not really much, other than I got a little more clarification on that. So, again, I believe that Calipari believes that the kid's coming in for a visit. If things blow up, Arkansas could peel away if they think the money's too steep, and that will mean that he won't come in for a visit. It could be that Arkansas and wants, for optics reasons, wants to get a little bit more comfortable with the idea that they can get this kid before they bring him in for a visit. Because they're probably not going to go through the motions of that. If they really think they're being used to drive up Louisville or Duke, if those are truly the preferred destinations, who knows at this point? Again, if it's a highest bidder thing, any team willing to go, up enough, and we saw that with even on a much smaller level with Silla, Muhammad Silla, Georgia Tech, had a better deal than Arkansas did. He still made a private commitment to Arkansas, and Georgia Tech jumped it maybe even beyond what the kid was asking for initially, and because they wanted to make sure they got the player. For whatever reason, they missed on some guys. We talked about that before that ever happened, that Georgia Tech keep an eye on it, and they might throw NIL money around because they missed on some other stuff. So I'm not saying that after the fact. We talked about that as a potential before it ever happened, and it happened really late in that. So I'm just saying things shift and change in recruiting, and with NIL, that part of it doesn't change either. You can have a kid thinking, okay, I've seen all the offers, I want to go here. Nate Ament has publicly said the highest bidder doesn't necessarily get him, but I think that's probably the right thing to say, because the kid, the camp doesn't want to come off as seeming like, it's just a way. It's a soft skill way of talking about it. If it affects you, the people covering it and having the conversations and some of the behind the scenes stuff, they may not know everything, but they are, when we talk to 2 or 3 of them that are pretty close to it covering it, and they're kind of saying the same thing and where they think it might be going, pay attention to it. Doesn't mean they're exactly right, but they might be. All right. So I've said a lot there to say, I think Arkansas is still right in the thick of this. I think Calipari believes he's going to get a visit. And the only way that doesn't happen is if the money isn't where Arkansas is comfortable, and then it doesn't happen. Cal is a player. That's the other thing. Calipari has got everybody else on this list beat. Duke is a program, not really. I mean, Krzyzewski, we saw the success he had getting 5 stars. Those guys go to the NBA too. Calipari's even a little bit better, though, I think, because he consistently did it, played that game longer with this level of player. Then Kay got into it late. Kay's gone. They're still loading up on guys. I mean, Cooper Flagg, we know about him. We know this next class coming in, there's going to be guys going to the NBA. But I think Calipari's players, when you look at it across the board and the max contracts and the success they have at the next level, I just think he's on a plateau of his own, and that certainly helps Arkansas. Now it's a matter of, are you going to put enough in there in that pile to get this kid? And is it worth it? I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying if Calipari thinks so, and Tyson and whoever else is chipping in, if they think so, it's their money. The value is based on what they're willing to do. And so the market can be reset at any time just by what someone's willing to pay and for whom. And it's probably smart for Ament and his camp to drag this out, as long as they are. That also tells me that he just doesn't have, he's not settled in on a specific team at this point. It doesn't mean that he's not favoring Louisville or Duke or Louisville, Finkler or Einhorn. But why wait then if you are? So I think Arkansas is very much in the mix until they're not. And I know that's not much of an opinion, but until we hear that he's coming for a visit, what's the point? If you don't get players on campus, I don't care what you're offering them. You got to get them on campus for a visit. Silla had been on Georgia Tech's campus and had visited there. It's not like he just took the bigger NIL money like Brandon Garrison did, sight unseen with Kentucky. We've seen Kentucky step out and throw more money maybe than most had valuations on players, even their own, but for optics reasons and because he just took that Arkansas visit. I'm convinced that's why they did that with Brandon Garrison. So there's more than one way things can play out with every player. And a guy this highly rated and valued, it might get crazy. So strap in, get ready for it. All right, 20 minutes in, spent a lot of time on that. I'm glad I did. We've talked so much about who will Arkansas retain, the five guys that seem the most likely in terms of if you looked at the top nine, obviously Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, Big Z, DJ Wagner, and Trevor Brazile. Trevor Brazile made a case for why you might want him back if you could get more of that from him, what he did in that must win over Texas in overtime. If you could get more of that consistently from him, man, you'd love it to get him back even. So we're not going to spend as much time on that today. I do want to talk about, I've been talking about potential portal players, not saying potential that this is the player that Calipari is going to want, but just throwing out some thoughts based on Arkansas's potential to bring back some guys and who would complement those guys. We talked about two players he recruited on the front line. Arkansas is definitely going to need frontline pieces out of the portal. There's no doubt about that, because so far it's a guard-heavy high school class, and with Ament, it really doesn't give you any beef on the front line. As a small ball four, he'll be less of the four even than the dude Thero is as a small ball 3-4 combo. So you're going to have to go front line. So we talked about Jayden Quaintance. I've talked about Somtu Cyril. A couple of guys he signed at Kentucky came to Arkansas. They didn't come with him. In certain ways on different levels, they've proven themselves at times on the front line, playing at Arizona State for Quaintance. Cyril to a lesser degree, about half the minutes at Georgia, but they're intriguing. They don't bring a ton of experience, but they do have high major experience. And Quaintance is a guy that has to come back another year and a potential first round pick, maybe in a year after his sophomore season. The last time I also talked about a staff where they've already made a coaching change before the season's over. Utah in the Big 12, and Keanu Dawes, a 6'9" forward that checked some boxes, playing about 16, 17 minutes a game, and a really good rebounder, a decent scorer, can shoot a little bit from three. We talked about him as if you were expanding your roster to 10 or 11, could you then maybe look back in from your 9 to 11 guy? Would this be the kind of player that you could then say, all right, we have more insurance here. This is someone that can play for us when we have injuries on our front line, or we have illness, or we've got foul trouble combined with an injury, whatever. Arkansas's run up against so much of that. I'm just throwing some thoughts out there. If Calipari expands a little bit, maybe here are some players. Today, because I'm seeing so much talk about, man, we know Arkansas could use a 3-point shooter, someone that's, more than streaky. And that's kind of their bread and butter. And because there's been so much talk about the season Joseph Pinion's had, the former Hog, played 2 years at Arkansas, is having at Arkansas State on HogvilleNET, where I provide my written coverage and content, and of course this YouTube channel, as well as other places. I'm seeing a lot of, man, Penny would be a nice pickup for Calipari in the portal after the season. Something interesting is Arkansas has a history of players not only being Razorbacks, but going off and playing at other high-profile schools or other schools, and then coming back to Arkansas. It's happened before. We know for different kinds of reasons before transfer-heavy, before the portal in a different era in the 90s, it was Sunday Adebayo because of what the NCAA did. They ruled him ineligible at Arkansas when they shouldn't have. He ends up at Memphis, competed against Arkansas, and then he got an extra year of eligibility back in a time when the NCAA just really didn't do that unless it was an injury. Because they shouldn't have ever ran him off from Arkansas, and he didn't even get to play a full season that year. I mean, I covered him that summer after he was running away from Arkansas in Chicago at the NBA Combine. They used to have it wasn't a draft combine. I don't remember what they called it, but it was basically effectively a 2-day event, and I covered that. And Darnell Robinson, Sunday Adebayo, they were both there. And Adebayo was going through that process, then ended up going to Memphis. Then he came back to Arkansas. Most recently, it was Jimmy Witt. He came to Arkansas's program as a top 100 recruit, recruited by Mike Anderson and his staff. That didn't work out. He went to SMU. Then he came back and played for Eric Musselman. Is it insane to think that Joseph Pinion wouldn't maybe come back, different coaching staff? Now, from the standpoint of that, it kind of lines up maybe with what a Jimmy Witt did. When you look at him numerically, 12 points a game at Arkansas State, his big breakout game was against a ranked Memphis team, a big win for Arkansas State on the road. 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 block shots. He was 5 of 11 from three, but he's a steady. I mean, he's shooting right around 38% from three. He's taken 194 threes. So he's going to be over 203 attempts by the time the year's up. And if you go back to him at Arkansas as a freshman, he played a huge role. Pinion did, 6'5" wing out of Morrilton, played a huge role in a couple of huge must-win games for Arkansas in SEC play. 13 points in home wins, comeback wins where Arkansas was losing. Musselman turned opinion, late in the first half, I think, of both games, or at some point, Arkansas was trailing Ole Miss and a ranked Missouri team at the time, 15th ranked, I think, top 20. And Pinion comes in and turns things around. He was 3 of 6 from three in both of those games. He finished with 13 points in both of those games. He had in one of them, I think maybe the Ole Miss game, he had 5 or 6 rebounds, and I think again, and he had a block shot in one of those games. But he did more than just knock down threes. He scored inside the arc, and he got to the free throw line. So he helps. I mean, that's not an NCAA tournament team. That's Arkansas's Sweet 16 season after back-to-back Elite Eights, after going 8-10 in the SEC. There is no NCAA tournament without those contributions from Pinion. Arkansas was not doing well in those games. And just his gravity as a three-point shooter and what he brought to it. So there is a proof of concept that Pinion can be that, because he was as a true freshman. He is a better player now. Yeah, the type of numbers and stats he's getting now, he wouldn't get if he came back to Arkansas. That's probably the biggest reason why he shouldn't come back, if he's enjoying the 25 minutes a game and the impact he's having on a good program. But who knows if some other school is going to come after ASU's head coach at the end of the season, and when would he want to stick around, see who the new coach is? Maybe that guy's there, Brian Hodgson. He's a really good coach, was part of Nate Oates' Alabama staff. So there's a lot of things with Pinion in terms of would there be value there. He's not typically the kind of guy that a Calipari would necessarily go after, but in this portal era, and based on some of Arkansas's weaknesses, if you did expand your roster to 10 or 11, and you could throw him some NIL money that's better than what he might be getting at A-State or what he might get somewhere else, would that be something that Pinion would consider doing? Another different opportunity. Again, I think the kind of role he has, I'm proud of him. I'm glad he's getting it. I've covered this young man, like I always say, these in-state kids since they were 8th and 9th grade. I've watched his development. I watched him go through a really bad knee injury that sidetracked his development, and it impacted him some in Arkansas. He still wasn't fully over it. He's more athletic than you think. He's a good rebounder. He's averaging 4 rebounds per game in his 25 minutes. He's averaging nearly 1 block shot per game. I mentioned he had 3 blocks against Memphis. That's a team with good players. I mean, Memphis isn't really a mid-major, So I don't know. It's just it's what does Pinion want moving forward? Would he want to come back to Arkansas with a new coach staff and a new opportunity? Again, the opportunity in a role I could never envision being what he's getting now at Arkansas State and Jonesboro. But I do think he's the kind of guy that Arkansas maybe would have 2 or 3 more wins just because of what he does to affect a defense. And again, if you looked at his freshman season at Arkansas in a low matter of volume, I think he only took 34 threes, but he shot 38%. He's taken 194 threes this year. I mentioned he's going to go over 200. Pinion shooting between 37 and 38%. That's who he is. Yeah, his sophomore season at Arkansas, he took 18 threes and shot 27%. He had less of a role and less of an opportunity on a team that stunk to high heaven up and down the roster last year. It wasn't a good season. I don't put that on him. I look at what he did as a freshman and the opportunities he got, and I look at what he's doing now. If you say, well, he can't play at this level, probably not 25 minutes again in the way Calipari recruits. And again, that may be all the reason not for him to even consider it. But you never know what motivates a player. Again, what kind of NIL money does Arkansas get willing to spend? And if they did expand to 10 or 11 deep roster, because he would certainly make sense if you do something like that. I would even argue if you stay 9 deep, it wouldn't be crazy. It wouldn't be out of the realm of making some sense for him to be in a player like that to be in that group. There are other shooters out there. It's not just Joseph Penn. There are other guys that could fill that role that are playing on the high major level that might be available, or other mid majors. I mean, Calipari will bring mid majors. Antonio Reeves, we've seen it with arguably the best portal player that what everybody thought was coming out of Florida Atlantic in a Final Four run, and we know not your typical mid-major, but that was Nellie Davis. But Pinion, to me, there's a value there. And again, where he is in his career and the opportunity he's getting now after not playing much at Arkansas for 2 years, I wouldn't expect him to be a viable option. And so you're saying, well, then why bring it up? Well, because people are talking about it. It's being suggested. So I'm looking at the pros and cons. I think it would be a win for Arkansas, but I don't know that it'd be a win for Joseph Pinion based on the opportunities he gets now and the role he has now. If he wanted to come back and be a Razorback, and you know, Jimmy Witt was a little bit different. Jimmy Witt was a full-time starter and a heavy minutes guy, and Musselman recruited him with that kind of role in mind, and so he went from SMU back up to the big leagues. That was obviously before SMU was in the ACC, which doesn't even feel like the big leagues anymore. By the way, I'll take a shot at the ACC. When you're covering the SEC, you get to now take shots at everybody, right? With the strength of this league. All right, 30 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Boogie is projected to. Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly, since someone's bringing up comments. I mean, I've seen a lot of mock drafts, and when I check it recently, you see Adu Thero and Boogie Fland both, and a lot of these in the late first round, you know, mid to low 20s, mid to high 20, whatever, to getting closer to 30. I've also seen it with Boogie now because he's been out in some mid second round, early to mid second round mocks. I saw Carter Knox in a second round in one of the mocks, only one. So, you know, you just keep an eye on it. Carter Knox is playing better and better. Big Z's doing better and better. I don't think it's over yet in terms of where mocks might land, but also it wouldn't be insane to think these guys should test the waters and at least get some feedback at the end of the season. And we'll see what their decisions are. NIL is such a big part of it now. You know, I don't know if you sweeten an NIL deal by, you know, asking them to focus on coming back. I don't know that Calipari will ever try to steer a player away from entering just to at least test the waters if they're not fully sure yet. But NIL is obviously going to impact it because I don't think a lot of guys want to go in and be second round picks where they don't have something guaranteed beyond a two-way deal, you know, or something like Isaiah Joe got going at number 49 was already locked into something that was comparable to some of the back end first round guys in terms of his guaranteed money and what that looked like. So, you know, there's a lot of ways those things can go. It's just a little too early to know right now. And I like talking about the Joseph Pinion again because people are talking about it. It makes sense to me. If I was looking at any kid that either played at Arkansas recently that left, or any of the other in-state kids, whatever, there's also a little value and interest for, you know, Calipari. If he thinks a player in-state can help him, he has said it. He will recruit him. What does he think in a scenario like I described? Maybe you expand your roster to 10 or 11. Does he think a player like that would be worth going after? And then again, Pinion, where he's at now and the opportunities he's getting, unless there's a coaching change there, I'm not sure that would be, you know, there's enough incentive for him because the role would likely be reduced. I didn't understand that last comment that came up. I'm not good with the comments anyway. I want Knox and Richmond on this roster as sophomores. Yeah, who doesn't, man? They're both good. And what's so funny to me is I had someone on Twitter the other day made some comment because Rick Pitino came out and made some comment about he's not recruiting fives. You know, he's going to go portal. He's not going to sign a high school player. St. John's is having incredible success in a power league, the Big East. And then Adam Zagoria, who's New York based, national college basketball. He also covers professional tennis. He's written for the New York Times, for Forbes magazine. He also interviewed, I guess, I don't know, maybe a high school coach in that New Jersey, New York area who was commenting on Pitino's comment. And then he pushed it on Calipari and said, yeah, how much success is Calipari having this year with high school players? And the point is, this Calipari actually dialed down what he normally does. He drilled it down to 3. Only one of those guys was projected as a first round pick coming into it, or potential first round pick. That was Boogie Fland. You know, Carter Knox maybe had some back end mocks, but nothing heavily serious there. And Arkansas was maximizing the talents of Boogie Fland at an all league level in the best conference in the country. He still got first round draft projections. And Carter Knox and Billy Richmond have progressively gotten better. They haven't been the problems. The freshmen have not been the problems on this team. It's been the veteran guys you brought in that were all SEC picks, National Player of the Year watch list, other veteran guy you brought back to be a Razorback again, that haven't lived up. And those have been the more glaring things. Nellie Davis is rounding into a good player at Arkansas. And I don't think it's too little too late. Arkansas is on a good path. We're going to talk bubble here just in a second. We've really stretched this recruiting out and portal and all that talk. But I disagree. I think Calipari's done a great job with these freshmen. I look at their development. You have to give the coaching staff credit too, not just, and the players as well. The coaching staff is showing them how to be effective and positive impacts at this level. And man, are they at every part of adversity now. When you lose, Arkansas's without its two leading scorers on the season, and yet by combination of both in this last game being out and the previous 9 games with Boogie out, Arkansas's gone 6-4 in that stretch after starting 0-5 in this league. There are some of the top tier teams in the league that are faltering a little bit. Some of them are on some bad skids right now. Arkansas, it's not like Calipari's just been negligent on the job. I think he's actually done a good job. I had some question marks early. I had some criticisms. Now I'm looking at it. I'm like, you know what? He's doing a hell of a job with what he has. Yeah, he assembled this roster. Perhaps he maybe should have taken 10 or 11 guys to get to that. And who knows? They're doing okay where they are now. I don't think it's optimal. I don't think it's a good way to do it. But, he may say, look what we did. We made it to the NCAA tournament. We're not there yet. If they make it, he may say, I'm sticking with this 9-deep formula. We don't know where that's going. I hope not. Yeah, Richmond is a dog. Adu and Nelly kill us. Nelly, to some degree, because he wasn't what was projected, but he's been pretty good during this run. He's not perfect, but I like the stuff he does defensively, and he's typically his box score plus is one of the best on the team. Usually him and Adu Thero, who's now out, are up there. Billy Richmond's usually up there too. All right, so let's get on to some other things. We're 37 minutes in. Lenardi comes out today. Arkansas was on that last 4-in list for a few weeks, couple of weeks anyway. There's a cluster of 5 teams, now 4 in the SEC, that are on the bubble. Vanderbilt with that road win at A&M. They beat Kentucky at home. This year they beat Tennessee at home. So they've got some good wins. They're up to 4 quad 1 wins now, but Vanderbilt's no longer on the bubble. They're probably not too far off of it. If they were to lose, 2 of these last 3, or maybe all 3, they'd probably certainly be back on it at that point. But they're off the bubble for now. But Arkansas is the highest ranked team now on the bubble out of the SEC in the 3rd overall. So they're part of the last 4 buys, a 10 seed in Lenardi's update. He's got them projected right now playing in Raleigh at North Carolina against Memphis, which would be interesting in a first-round game. Calipari used to coach there. There's obviously been a history with Arkansas and Memphis over the years. And Tennessee is the 2 seed on the same bracket. So Arkansas and Tennessee in the 2nd round, in theory, and that'd be interesting as well. So you'd play 2 teams out of that state in Raleigh, North Carolina, based on the way Lombardi projected. But the news here is that Arkansas moved up from the last 4 and jumped about 3 or 4 spots up to the 3rd team on the last 4 buys. And so that informs me a little bit more about Arkansas's margin for error. By the way, Oklahoma is now the top team. I think it's Oklahoma's the top team on the last 4-in list. Texas is at the bottom of the last 4-in. And Georgia, by way of its big win at home over Florida in the midweek, went from the next 4 out all the way up as the number 1 team on the first 4 out. So they're 1 spot away from being in there. And Texas is 1 spot away. So Texas and Georgia play each other on Saturday. That's a game. That's a bubble game. Someone's got to win. A bubble team's going to win and improve a little bit, and a bubble team's going to lose. And what I find interesting about that is Texas, it's a 2nd consecutive game in a bubble game where they're, right there with the team that they're playing. And I think it's Texas at Georgia. I may have jumbled that around. By the way, Oklahoma plays at Ole Miss, and so you want to see Ole Miss win that game. You're competing now against all bubble teams, including the ones in your own league. But this informs me a little bit where Lenardi has Arkansas now as the third team on the last four buys list as a 10 seed, that I think the margin for error now, it's kind of what we've been saying. Arkansas's got 3 games to go, get to 7-11, which means you only need one more win. Arkansas 17-11 overall, 6-9 in the league. So you need one more win to, if you only won one of the last 3, you'd finish 7-11. We've kind of said all along that'd probably be enough in this league. So I look at it a couple of ways. South Carolina, yeah, it would still be a quad 2 loss, ranked 91st in net. South Carolina, we're going to talk about this matchup, but even as a quad 2, it'd be kind of a bad quad 2 loss. And I think if Arkansas lost that game, it would probably bump Arkansas down to, they'd probably still be somewhere on that. It really is relative to what other bubble teams are doing, but Arkansas may have enough cushion where they'd still be on the last 4 in list. And then you'd have a quad 1 game at Vanderbilt. Mississippi State being ranked right there at 30, that's still a quad 1 home game. That's the other thing. You'd really like to see Mississippi State do well here before they play Arkansas, because you want that team still in the top 30 so that that's a quad 1 result at home. But I think if you lost at South Carolina and split those last 2 games, you got a great shot that one of the, if you split them, you're picking up another quad 1 win. And that'd probably be enough, with the other one maybe being a quad 1 result as well if it was a loss, if you stayed close in those games, that you would still get in. So, and that would be the projection before you go into the SEC tournament, which is what I've been kind of saying. And I've been a little bit hesitant to fully embrace that thought because of some of these bubble teams doing well, even when Arkansas beat 15th ranked Missouri in a top 15 net team, not getting much lift off of that. Texas ranked lower in net, and it was another home game, and it was quad 2 for Arkansas, not quad 1 like Missouri, was relative to you beat another bubble team. Oklahoma got beat at home in another bubble team. And so there's some other teams lost as well that are on the bubble that aren't in the SEC. So everything's a little bit relative, not just to what you're doing, obviously, but other teams. And then other teams that you've played through the year, through the season, if they're floundering, it might bring you down a little bit and it'd be just enough to drop you. So Arkansas right now, I think, is in a spot where, coming down to 3 games, where 1 win is probably going to be enough out of 3 to be projected into the dance heading into the SEC tournament. Now, people differ on how important are tournaments. Well, they're important if you're on the bubble. They're important if you're on the bubble. They're not going to wildly change some of the higher seeds based on what they do in a tournament. And some bubble teams can have a good run in their tournament and still not enough. But if you're on the good part of the bubble, and some teams just on the other side of it in a bad spot, and you get bounced with not a, maybe against a so-so iffy opponent in the first round, and some other team has some decent wins in their tournament, it might be enough to be in a bad spot. It just might be. So that's why I say 1 more win, regardless of how you do it, even if it's not South Carolina, I think keeps Arkansas most likely with a projection in to the NCAA tournament, going into the SEC tournament, and then you still may have more work to do. Because it's hard to imagine because you're going to have at least 1 game in that. So if you win only 1 of your last 3 regular season, and then you lost again, that means you went 1-3 in your last 4, and you were on the bubble. So that might be trouble. It might be just plenty to get you knocked out. That's why I say if Arkansas wins 2 of the last 3, the Razorbacks are a lock. They're a lock to get in the NCAA tournament. So that's how I look at it. I think Arkansas just needs to win 2 out of 3 where there's no questions asked moving forward on that. You win all 3 of these, it's 2 is a lock, win all 3, and now you're just playing for seeding, and the SEC tournament can maybe help you a little bit if you made a run there to improve. I think a ceiling for this team would probably be a 7 seed. That's probably what the ceiling would be for something that we're talking about right now. So I was getting a call there coming up on my notifications from one of my sources. It's probably got some information on Ament. So if it's anything's crazy, because I'm about to get off here, we'll come back in and do another one. All right. So that's what Arkansas's got left. It's not a whole lot different than what we've been saying, but I think just the fact that Arkansas's now in that last 4 bye group, I think it makes you feel good that a win at South Carolina, regardless of what happens the next 2 games, probably still has you in, even if it's last 4 in as a projection. That may mean you still need to win a game in the SEC tournament, but it might work out where even if you don't, you're still okay. 2 is a lock again, and then 3 you're just talking about singing that point. South Carolina, let's talk about this matchup real quick. Colin Murray Boyles has lit Arkansas up in the past. He's on a path to being a lottery pick in the NBA draft, probably. Certainly a first round pick. 6'7" forward that was a double machine, and South Carolina swept Arkansas last year. We know this is a different team, but I think the fact that Adu Thero is likely to be out. I mean, I don't know if there's been official word on it. I don't think he's going to be available. It may be the SEC tournament would be the soonest he's available, but let's see. Let's see. Let's hope I'm wrong about that. I don't know that for a fact. But I think, in this game even more so because of the different things that Murray Boyles can do. Uh, is it Murray Boyles or Boyles Murray? I always screw up these hyphenated names. I'm bad about it. I shouldn't have it memorized, but I do this. But again, he was a double machine against Arkansas last year. 16 points, 8.5 rebounds a game. And he's just a really smart, crafty, high floor IQ kind of guy that can get you in so many ways. And so Arkansas's got its work cut out. Nick Pringle, the frontline guy that transferred from Alabama, over 9 points and over 6 rebounds per game. So on the front line, they've got those two guys, Jabari Thomas, excuse me, and Jacoby Wright, a couple of guards. Wright's been at South Carolina for 4 years. And then the transfer, the 6-foot guard that's averaging double figures, Jabari Thomas. Both of those guys are, they're two of their main backcourt guys you want to keep an eye on. They've got another, I think, a second-year player. Last name starts with a U. I'll butcher it trying to say it. Another guard. He's a sophomore that shoots 41% from 3 on high volume. Has taken over 100 threes this season. I mentioned Jabari Thomas averaging double figures, has also taken over 100 threes, and he's shooting 35%. So they're two guards, they're two frontline guys, or their main guys. They've got 6 guys that play the heavy amount of minutes, but they'll go 10 deep, kind of like LSU. LSU in that 70-58 loss to Arkansas scored only 58 points, but 10 different players scored. This is the similar kind of thing, bottom of the league kind of team. They play a lot of players, try different things. And so on any given game, you'll see as many as 10 players for South Carolina. Arkansas only goes 7 deep. We've not seen that really be a problem necessarily in some of these games against teams that are going deeper into their bench. But we'll see. But here's the thing with South Carolina. Coming off a 30-point loss at Missouri. Prior to that, they beat Texas at home by 15. Their first league win, their only league win. This team's played 7 home games already in league play. They got blown out in their first one at home to Alabama. It's hard to keep up with Alabama. Lost by 20. And then they blew out Texas. 15 points. That's a blowout. So those 2 games aside, the other 5 games, they've lost by 1 or 2 possession margin. 1 or 2 possession margin. And those teams are Auburn, Florida, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and I'm leaving another one of the Ole Miss. I mean, that's been what it's been. I think it was Ole Miss. It's been the top tier teams, the teams at the top of the league. Though it has a 3-point loss on the road at Vanderbilt. South Carolina on the road typically gets blown out. It had a close game at Vanderbilt, maybe another game that was marginally close. Every game at home except Alabama and Texas, who they beat in a blowout, has been a 1 or 2 possession game against really good teams. It is hard to win there. Arkansas, again, it's a quad 2 value. Arkansas, by beating Texas, is 2-2 in quad 2. You'd like to finish, and then Mississippi State may end up being a quad 2 as well. But right now, we know that South Carolina will be. You'd like to have a winning record in quad 2. You're not going to be able to get a winning record in quad 1, even if you pick up 1 or 2 more quad 1 wins here before you go into SEC tournament play. So you'd like to take care of that business. And again, even though in the quad spectrum it wouldn't be a bad loss, it's still going to be looked at. Well, you can, I'm not going to run through the Nate Ament stuff. Just this will be in the archive. You can just go back and watch the first part of it. It was nothing huge breaking. It was just sort of some updates on more information I've gotten on Nate Ament, which may add more to the conversation of, what is it going to take to get him? Where's that NIL? Maybe where is that headed? And, just little stuff. It wasn't anything major. Because if it was going to be major, I would have said something was breaking, but we didn't do that. So this is going to be a heavy lift for Arkansas. You want to see Trevor Brazile and Jonas Adu. I mentioned the front line. Your Arkansas doesn't have a player that can replicate what Murray Boyles does. So they're going to have to, do it by committee. Big Z, Last two games, 38 points. The last time Arkansas was on the road against Auburn, he didn't score. He missed everything. This isn't Auburn. This is not a South Carolina team that excels in any place, anywhere, other than they're tough to beat at home and they've got good players. This is the SEC. Let's not forget, this is a team that went, I think, 10-3 in non-conference play, and South Carolina beat Clemson. Clemson's a team that's been ranked in the top 15, one of the top. I know it's the ACC, but still, that's a big win. I mean, Clemson knocked off Kentucky. Clemson's got a good resume. That's an NCAA tournament team. So South Carolina is not chopped liver. This is how good the SEC is. You can't look at that 1-14 record and say that completely defines this team. Usually you can on something like that, but as close as they've been to the top ranked teams in the country, because most of them reside in the SEC at playing at home, man, this is a good team. And so Arkansas, really needs this win. I'm not going to call any win right now a must win, because I think one out of these last three going into the tournament probably has you still in. But because that's dicey, I still think you want to get the two, because that locks you in for sure. So to say Arkansas must win two more to be an NCAA tournament team, I won't say that. I will say two more locks you in. One more, you got to win one more at minimum. You haven't done enough. So one more again, and that may be just enough. 1 out of 3 going in the SEC tournament to be projected in. All right, 51 minutes in. I've done it again. Didn't keep it to 30 or 35. That's just how I roll. But thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. The tip-off tomorrow in Columbia, South Carolina is noon Central Time. It's on SEC Network. So obviously I'll be doing a post-game pretty fairly early in the afternoon or the early evening. And I didn't want to do two of these on the same day because of the timing. So I jumped in here today. I'll be going to Jonesboro tonight to cover the Jonesboro Hurricane against Little Rock Central as the 6A, the highest classification, wraps up its regular season. And we start now looking ahead. Some of the teams in the state are already doing regional tournaments. 5A and 6A, their state tournaments start next week. Then we'll have, obviously, the finals down in Hot Springs. But I'll be in Jonesboro later tonight for that. I'll be doing Razorback coverage tomorrow. But until next time, thank you for being here. If you came in late, go start it, cue it back up in the archive, and you can go watch and see what I said about Nate Ament. But thank you for being here. Hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't already. I'm Kevin McPherson. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. See you next time.